Hello everyone. I will talk about the Secure Enclave, which is found inside all the iPhones. First of all, who am I? I'm Quentin Saling. I'm a security researcher at Synactive. Synactive is an offensive security company, French company, which is also organizing Hexacon. We have about 200 ninjas, and we are hiring. So during this talk, I'm going to start by doing a quick overview of the Secure Enclave processor, so that everyone gets up to speed about the subject. And then we will go into the interesting details, so the security features that they added over the years, which covers pointer authentication, SEP patches, and finally the trusted boot monitor. So first of all, an overview. What's the SEP? It's a cryptographic coprocessor that was added to the iPhone 5S quite a long time ago now. It was in 2013. It comes with dedicated peripherals to do cryptography, like an IAC engine. And also it has an encrypted memory, which is not reachable from the main application processor. And all communication between SEP and the application processor goes through a mailbox to limit the attack surface. It handles many interesting stuff, such as user data encryption, biometrics, either with the finger or the face, so Touch ID and Face ID, to do unlocks and Apple Pay, and also HGCP. There are few information public about SEP. There were talks about demystifying the Secure Enclave processor, which was the first one in 2016, which is quite a bit old. And the most recent one is Attack the Secure Boot of SEP in 2020. You also have some information in the Apple Platform Secure Guide that they update from time to time. But it's pretty high-level information about how it does cryptography. The last vulnerability that was discovered in SEP is the Blackbird vulnerability in 2020. It's an unpatchable vulnerability in the SEP ROM. It was an integer overflow that led to access to the encrypted memory. I won't go into the details of how the vulnerability works, but because of the integer overflow, the SEP ROM used memory that was not protected, and so that led to access to this memory and finally arbitrary firmware upload on some iPhones. So, how do we start researching the Secure Enclave? First, we need to get a look at the code. All the SEP ROMs are leaked on, almost all the SEP ROMs are leaked on securom.fun, and you can just load it in your favorite disassembler. SEP-OS, which is the OS that is booted afterwards, is inside the firmware, in the Apple firmware, in the IPSW. The problem is that it's one of the last firmware that they still encrypt for some reasons. But thankfully, many people get access to the keys and leak them on the Apple Wiki. So you can use these keys to decrypt the firmware and get access to the code. And there's also an IDA loader that you can use to just load all the apps inside one database. And to get access to the firmware, to extract it and decrypt it, you can use the awesome IPSW tool by Blacktop. And you have both commands, extract and decrypt, which you can use to get the 10 megabytes of firmware in the 10 gigabytes of update file, which is quite nice. And then you ask for the decryption using the IV and the keys that you get from the wiki. So now that you have the code, we can start to look at how it works. At the very high level, the first thing that the SEP will execute is the SEP ROM. It's the code that is written in a ROM next to the chip. It's written once in the factory, and afterwards you can't modify it, which is a great thing so that attackers can't have persistence inside the SEP. But it's also a bad thing because if you have a vulnerability, you can't patch it. Then the application processor will send the SEP a firmware in an image4 format. The image4 format is Apple's proprietary format, update format for the firmwares. It's just a DAR encoded blob with two main components. the EM4P, so the payload, which will be our firmware, and also the image4M manifest, which is metadata and signature for the firmware. So upon receiving the firmware, the SEPROM will copy it into its memory and validate it using an RSA4K CA certificate. And it will also check the metadata inside the manifest to check that it matches the phone that you have. So for example, it will check the chip. So if you have the right model and also the exclusive ID, so that the manifest is for your phone and not one of your friend. And obviously, you also have the hash of the payload that you're trying to sign. Otherwise, it's pointless. And once the firmware is valid, the SEPROM will load it into memory and decrypt it and jump to it. And it will go into the kernel, which is an L4-based microkernel. As the name implies, a microkernel does the bare minimum, so it will basically handle only hardware-privileged operations, like memory mapping, interrupt scheduling, incorrect handling, and thread scheduling. At the start, when they released it, the syscalls were pretty simple. You had one ID that went to one handler, and it was really easy to reverse and understand. Now, each kernel object has its own dispatch table. So when you see a call to a syscall on the userland, you need to figure out what object it's calling on to know the proper dispatch table and the function that will be called in the end. There are a handful of kernel objects. The main ones are the C node, which is the name that they give the objects, and also the endpoint, the 5, which is used to do communication between processes. And they also have many other objects to manipulate memory and also timers and other stuff that they need. Next, the kernel will start SEPOS, which is the userland kernel. So it's running EL0. SEPOS will then start the drivers, which are just applications. And they are a bit more privileged than the others in that they can access the hardware peripherals, like the random number generator or the AES engine and other peripherals. And finally, SEPOS will start the applications that are used to communicate with the IP, like, for example, the key store. And all these apps communicate between them using IPC. So now that we have done a quick overview of the Secure Enclave, we can go into the security stuff, which is the more interesting stuff. And we will start with pointer authentication. Just a quick recap. It's an ARM instruction set. It's used to do a cryptographic signature of pointers. The signature is stored in the I bits of the pointer. It prevents overwriting of the pointer by an attacker, because if you can't sign a pointer, you can't overwrite it. It was introduced in A12 CPUs, so in 2018. You have two sets of keys, A and B, and many contexts in which you can use those keys. So the instruction context, the data context, and the general context, which gives you 5 keys that you can use for whatever needs you might have. And you have a dedicated instruction to use the pointers and sign them. So you have the pack instructions to sign a pointer, and the BLRA to call a function pointer by verifying the signature. You also have many more instructions, but you can go look them up on the ARM wiki. It's not really interesting. So how do you do a sign pointer? Obviously, you need the pointer. You can also add an optional context, which might be where the pointer is stored. That way you can swap sign pointers. And you can also add an optional diversifier, so that 2 sign pointers have different signatures. A quick example with a virtual function call. We have a vtable in X8. We will first load the pointer in X9 from the vtable. We will use the vtable as the optional context and put it in X17. And we will also add the 0xBBBF diversifier. And then we will call BLRAA to verify the signature of the pointer with our context and branch to it if it's a valid signature. So how is it used in CEP? First, in the CEPROM, you have only the key IB that is set on A14. It's used to sign the return addresses so that you can't overwrite it on the stack. For some reason, the compiler still emits authenticated branches with the A key, even though if it's not used. But it's not a problem because since it's not set, the authentication is ignored, and it just works. They added the IA key on A18, so 2024, which was last year. They used it to sign function pointers, and they used the chain fixup, which is a format that they use on the userland to provide the signature information, and the signing is done really early in the boot to protect the pointers. Keys are also generated using the hardware RNG so that they are not predictable and it's safe. Next, in CEPOS, the kernel will generate the keys for the CEPOS application. And inside CEPOS, the address of the fixup chain is hard-coded, and it will just sign all the pointer in the chain. Then CEPOS will load each application and generate keys for them. And once the application starts, they will do the job of the DYLD on the iOS side, which means that we will first look up a segment in the header, which is the LC CEP chain fixup, which gives us the address of the chain fixup. They will iterate all over the chain, sign the pointers, and next they will look up another header, which is the LC CEP shared library chain, which is the fixup chain from the shared library. And you can also have a chain of libraries, but they only use one at the moment. And you apply the fixup for the shared library. And obviously, to sign pointers, you need to write them. So you need to have write access to your text region, which is bad. And so finally, the app asks CEPOS to be marked as read-only so that you can't overwrite the pointers afterwards. So how does the fixup chain look like? It's a simple structure. You can see that inside you have the information about the pack signature, so the diversifier, if you need to have an optional context, and the key that you're using. And a quick example from the firmware. So we don't really see the addresses on the right, but it's the one on the left. The first part is the 8011, which means that we have an authenticated rebase to do, and that the next pointer that we have to sign is 2 keywords away, which is the case, and also that we use the key 0 and an address diversifier. The diversifier will be BBBF, like in the previous example, and we have the offset from the base address where the function is to create the pointer. Okay, so that's it for the pointer authentication, which is not really new from iOS. Now into specific stuff from the CEP, which is CEP patches. It's a new firmware file that was introduced in A17, so the iPhone 15 Pro. It's also sent by the AP. It will allow for patching of the immutable ROM, because as I said at the start, if you have a vulnerability in your ROM, you can't patch it, so you are left vulnerable for the eternity. The file format is no longer an image4 for some reason. They decided to switch it for a small header with an offset and the side of either the payload and the manifest, but the EM4P and EM4M are still the same. And it's validated just like the firmware, because there's no reason not to validate an update. And then it's loaded at the fixed address. And so how do they use it? It's used across the CEPROM like a hook, and at various points of the boot process, you will have a call to the function call CEP patches with context. So we can see two examples there. For example, it will copy in the firmware, call the patches with the ID 8, saying, hey, I just copied the firmware, what should I do? And then it will validate the firmware, call again the patches with the ID9, telling it, hey, firmware's okay, what should I do? And the context that it gives to the patches is just a bunch of function pointers. And the only one that is used currently is the trace function. And as of iOS 26, it's just a big switch on the IDs, with just tracing logic. So we can see both our cases, 8 and 9, and it's just calling the trace function with tracing IDs. So not really very interesting for now. So this means that Apple doesn't know of any vulnerability in the SEPROM that they need to patch. And finally, we'll talk about the Trusted Boot Monitor. They introduced the first version in 2019 in the A13 devices. It's an ARM coprocessor that sits next to the SEP. It will monitor the execution of the SEPROM. So when it starts, the boot monitor will mark the pages of the SEPROM as executable. It will do so by writing some specific registers in the memory controller. And so even if you get access to the page table of the SEPROM and you manage to change it, the memory controller will still refuse to execute any code that it's not in the range, or also write the code from the SEPROM. And then it will reset the SEP at the start of the SEPROM so that execution can continue as before. Because the range is set by the boot monitor, SEP can no longer jump to the firmware. It needs to send the address of SEPOS to the boot monitor that will mark the page as executable and reset again the SEP at the start of SEPOS. Okay, that was version 1. Version 1 was not enough, so they introduced version 2 to the A17 Plus devices. So it's really the most recent devices. This version also exists on the IP side for the secure ROM. It now requires a manifest that is sent by the application professor. You can find it in the manifest that Apple signs in the SHSH under the SEP TBM section. And this contains two structs, the USER, which stands for micro certificate, and UCON, which is micro container. So first, the micro certificate. It contains an ECDSA P384 key to sign the UCON. And this is also signed by an hard-coded key in the TBM. It's currently the same key for all SEP, but the key for the application processor is different. And it will contain properties related to the platform, so the chip, the model of your phone, the security domain, and the security epoch, which are some properties that they have in the manifest. The user will look like that, so you can see that there's a big blob, random blob at the start, which is the key that they use to sign the UCON. Then you have the platform information, which is mostly a bunch of zeros because you have not that much information inside. And then you have booleans. They will use these booleans to tell, hey, I have this information in the certificate, and I need to validate it against what's in the container. And then you have the signature, which is validated using the key inside the TBM. One interesting thing to note is that they're using glitch-resistant booleans. So you don't have zeros and ones. You have obfuscated values that are different in the TMM and the IP, which means that if you want to glitch these values, you need to flip 32 bits instead of just one. And regarding the microcontainer, it's like the image4 manifest properties. You will find all the same information. So you have first the platform information that we will find in the certificate. You also have specific information like your device ID, and also hash of the firmware and the image4 manifest. And obviously, this container is signed with the key inside the user. So the updated boot process looks like this. The AP will send the TBM the manifest. Excuse me. The AP will send the TBM manifest, so both the user and the UCON concatenated, to the SEPROM. The SEPROM will just send it to the TBM. TBM will check that the signature of both the user, it will use this key to verify the signature of the user, and then it will use the key of the user to validate the signature of the UCON, just like certificates. And the properties of the UCOR, it will check that both the user and the UCON have properties that match, so that the chip, SDOM, and escape are the same. Then the AP will send the patches. Patches will be validated by the SEPROM, and the SEPROM will send them to the TBM. And at that point, the TBM will do another pass of checks. It will check that the properties that were given in the UCON matches the properties of the phone, so the ones that are in the fuse. And it will also verify that the hash of the firmware is the same as in its manifest, and also that the hash of the image for manifest is the same as the one in the TBM manifest. And if everything is okay, the TBM will mark the region of the patches as executable, so that the SEP can go inside it and execute the code. So this is the end of the talk. Currently, the SEP patches are no-op, which means that they have no vulnerability. The trusted boot monitor that they added adds yet another layer of security. So even if you have a vulnerability in a SEPROM, you also need now a vulnerability in the trusted boot monitor to get execution on the SEP. It's a really good example of defense in depth by Apple. And that's where I would put a locking Apple logo if I had one, but I don't. Thank you for your attention.